I thought I would give a talk when they said, what do you want to do? It would be on things I wish I knew before I went travelling. So basically, this might be a good reason for you to learn from my numerous mistakes and hopefully give you a bit of an idea about the situations I found myself in or the ways that I have used to deal with situations. I'm keeping it very broad and very generic. I'm not making it particularly vehicle dependent or cycling or walking or trekking or anything like that. These are really kind of general mindset things rather than individual detail. If anyone wants to go through individual detail, we can do that later on, afterwards, etc., etc. But maybe I should start by saying, you know, well, why should you listen to me? What on earth have I done that is of any use to you guys? So it's a kind of brief, this is my life and where I've come from type thing. So previous life, I used to be an overland driver. When I say that, most people look completely blank. They've no idea what that means. For those that don't know, there's probably some people here that do. It involved driving a large truck that's been converted to carry passengers and then taking people on journeys all over the world. It's an amazing way. If anyone's thinking of getting into travel, I highly recommend this as a method. Go and be a tour leader, a tour guide with a company. You'll get paid absolute peanuts. You're not there for the money. You're there for the experience. And everything I have learnt or that I now do is based on this kind of university of life that I did for 5 years, travelling all over the world, which I'll give you a little bit of detail about. I spent a year in South America, so you get to kind of tick off all the big things like, you know, Machu Picchu, walking the Inca Trail, getting to the Sun Gate, seeing the sunrise, the Altiplano in Bolivia, which is incredible. Up at sort of 4,000 meters with these active volcanoes and red lakes and green lakes. I've been to the Moreno Glacier in El Calafate, which is just the most stunning, one of the last few remaining advancing glaciers in the world. I spent 5 days on a truck barge up the Amazon, me and 6 fat Brazilian truckers for a week. It was amazing, one of the best experiences I had, where we travelled from Belém on the coast all the way up to Manaus. I've blown up dynamite in Bolivia. Where else do you get a chance to do that? If you go to Potosi, Cerro Rico, looking like a 12-year-old kid. I had amazing experiences, and I basically did a kind of 2 circuits of South America in terms of sort of driving around, leading these trips. I've spent time in India, driving in India, which is an amazing experience. No computer game will ever live up to what it's like to drive in India. It's fantastic. I've also travelled through Central Asia, which I highly recommend as an area of travel to go to. It's absolutely stunning. The Silk Road, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, places like this. Lesser known places. Any idea where that one is? Because that's a good pub quiz. Oh, there's some heads nodding. That's the Darvasa gas crater in Turkmenistan. It's in the middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of nowhere. And it's an enormous crater that was, I think, an old ex-Soviet gas pipeline, or it was somewhere where they were drilling for gas. And boy, did they find it. And it just burns day and night. This is sort of 30 years ago that they found this stuff. And it's just this enormous hole in the ground that just burns. They call it the gates of hell. It's amazing. And then Everest, you know, you've got to have your... Oh, I've actually cut the top of Everest off. That's brilliant. That's the highest mountain in the world, and I've cut the top off it. But yes, on the Tibetan side, I was able to travel through Western China, Tibet, and quite a lot of Central Asia as well. Africa, I've spent a lot of time in Africa. Most of it has been in West Africa, which is one of my favourite parts of the world, which of course is going through a terrible time at the moment. It's awful to think of these places that I've been to are now turning into a war zone. This is Mauritania. This is before there was a road, where actually at one point you have to drive along the beach for about 65k and hopefully get there before the tide comes in. Otherwise you're in trouble. So it was a great experience. East and West Africa are very, very different places. West Africa has very little in the way of tourist infrastructure, and that's the best and the worst thing about it. There's nothing to see in West Africa. There's no animals, there's no whitewater rafting, there's no great waterfalls, there's no the other stuff. But it's just everyday life in West and Central Africa is fantastic. Voodoo, going into these markets where you can buy your voodoo fetishes, amazing beaches that are just, no one there at all, pristine beaches. This is on the boat trip up to Timbuktu, where you would go to places where, I know it's the kind of holy grail that people talk about, going to places that no one's been to before, but it very much felt like that in these areas. And in fact, these kids, just after this photo, they were all doing these karate moves at me. They were all doing these kind of karate, and I couldn't figure out what it was about. And we had a guide, and I said, why are they all doing karate at me? And he asked them in local Bambara language. And basically, they said there's 3 things they know about the white man. The first thing, that all of them are very, very rich. If you're white, you must be rich. The second thing is you must be a doctor. Every white man they've ever seen has to be a doctor. And the third thing is they're all really, really good at karate, at kung fu. And I was like, why on earth is that? And he asked them, and it was because the only films they'd seen on really old, bad VHS videos was Chuck Norris movies, 80s Chuck Norris movies. And so their idea of a white person was everyone was Chuck Norris, which I thought was an amazing kind of flip on what they think about us as much as what we think about the locals. So anyway, all of that has given me, this knowledge. I know a lot about a little. And I know stuff about travel, basically, and travelling in the developing world. I'm not talking about kind of bucket and spade holidays or skiing. And I kind of finished that job. To be honest, you know, I got a little tired of the travelling public. It's not a career you can do forever. And when you get, you know, questionnaires at the end that say things like the road to Everest Base Camp was too bumpy and the Peruvian desert was too long, you know it's time to get out. And I loved every minute of it, but it's not something you can do for the rest of your life. So I then thought, well, what the hell am I going to do? How on earth am I going to... I'm not going to get a proper job. I've never had one of those. And I had to kind of think about what I would do. So what I was getting was a lot of people going to me going, oh, you've been to this. How do I get around there? Or where do you reckon is a good place to go to, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that maybe there's something in this. And I also think that the zeitgeist at the moment is that people are looking for their own adventures. I'm sure there's quite a lot of people in this room here who, although there's a plethora of tours and great, amazing stuff you can do, but I found that there are more and more people now looking to do their adventure, their way, in their style, their time frame, not with a group of other people. And, you know, we have the likes of Mr. McGregor and Mr. Borman to thank for that, because there we all saw these guys jumping on their motorbikes and disappearing off around the world and having a great adventure. The fact they had massive support crews and all the rest of it is another story. But the point was, I think a lot of people have seen that and thought, yeah, I want to do that, I can do that. And if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from today is that, yeah, you can. Because if a Muppet like me can do it, you don't have to be roughy-tufty SAS, Bear Grylls explorer, grizzled explorer at all to do this. A lot of the people I've met on the road or I've talked to in the past are people like you who've decided, right, I want to take some time off, I want to go and do my big trip, I want to explore.